All right, so to unpack, of course, these developments of the last few hours, I'm joined now by international relations expert Brooks Spector joining me this morning. Brooks, thank you for your time. You're looking so warm, but also happy Youth Day to you. Thanks for taking time out on this public holiday to speak to us. But we couldn't avoid what happened at Warsaw Airport. It seems some of the security detail, including the media, were rather delayed from disembarking. Is this normal under the circumstances that, I mean, this is a head of state accompanied by his entourage to this expected visit?
No, good morning and happy Youth Day to all celebrating, including people who are not so youthful anymore. No, it's not normal, but I mean, the problem is that the arrangements for a head of state visit are usually carefully worked out. All the permits are approved and organized and certified, and any weapons that must be carried by protective personnel are declared and meet the circumstances. And it was not simply the landing in Warsaw; it was also transiting Italian airspace that was not apparently fully worked out. And this speaks, I think, and I'm subject to correction on this by others perhaps, but this speaks to a lack of rigor and diligence on the part of the people arranging the trip, rather than the president himself, obviously. You take care of these arrangements so that the trip itself isn't derailed or the purpose of it isn't minimized. And if you don't have the travel details, the permissions, the visas, the permits, all the other waivers necessary, then things go off the rails rather badly. Fortunately, it does seem that the South African president and his immediate entourage did meet or are meeting with Ukrainian leaders, and then they will eventually go on to Russia as well. But what it does say is that the trip is the purposes of it are becoming a little bit unclear and are being overtaken by all the arrangements that go on around it rather than the purposes itself. The problem is, of course, that the purpose of the visit is not entirely clear either, because if you look at the Ukrainian position, it's quite reasonable that they say we're not going to negotiate away our territory, and negotiations must proceed on the basis of the Russian military's withdrawal from Ukraine. And the Russians, on the other hand, still seem resolute in their view that Ukraine really isn't a legitimate regime and it belongs to, as part of the greater Russian state. And those two views seem to be somewhat at odds with each other now, don't they?
Yeah, and also I've been just reading here from, the head of the president's Presidential Protection Unit. I'm getting a sense here that they may feel from this experience, Brooks, that they had been targeted. They have accused the Polish, officials of being racist. This is my quote from General Wally Rueda, saying blatantly sabotaging South Africa is what those actions speak to, because they did not allow them to offload their equipment and weapons. So even though this peace mission by these different African heads of states, well, they say it's meant to encourage dialogue between Russia and Ukraine. When we see Polish officials now, behaving in this matter, being accused of racism and sabotaging South Africa, do you get a sense that they are being accused of targeting South Africa?
Well, anytime you've been stuck on an airplane for 16, 17, 20 hours, you tend to get a little bit unhappy and you tend to get a little bit on edge, and you probably say things that you shouldn't say. And I suspect that the Security General feels himself pushed. In point of fact, I don't think the Poles have any intention or interest in sabotaging the visit. What I do think, though, is that the Poles, and other nations are not convinced that this visit is going to have the effect or the impact that some might hope for, because as I said earlier, the two sides are quite clearly very, very far apart in terms of what constitutes an acceptable way to end the war. And this doesn't even include, and I'll mention it here because it deserves to be noted, this doesn't even include the kinds of things that have to go into an after the fighting settlement. Once the guns are stilled and no more bullets or missiles are flying, there's going to have to be a discussion about reparations in some way, shape, or form, the cost to people and infrastructure that has been inflicted on Ukraine's population and its nation. And that's a much larger issue than whether or not General Rudd thinks that his people were disrespected.
Brooks, before I let you go, what do you make of some of the other African heads of states pulling out? We've all, of course, seen those reports that the likes of the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, Comoran President Azali al-Samani, Republic of Congo President as well, Denis Sassou Nguesso, all pulling out. With Sassou, I have to mention, trying to persuade all the other participants to equally pull out from this peace mission on the grounds of that launch of Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russia, saying that that visit might be a bit too dangerous. Do you get a sense that the grounds of pulling out are warranted, or could there be a bigger issue here to say maybe it's not all too clear what exactly this peace mission will achieve if both sides, as you've mentioned, Brooks, are too far apart from each other and there's no hope, or at least an indication that they might, of course, come to a meeting ground?
I tend to fall along the lines of your latter explanation, that there's simply not enough clarity on what's supposed to be achieved or what's proposed to be achieved. Usually things like this, there's an awful lot of groundwork that's done ahead of time by lower level officials to set out the ground rules, to set out the agenda, to set out the ways of carrying this out. But there's also the other point that anytime you try to coordinate a uniform visit by 6 or 7 heads of state, you're always looking for the possibility that things aren't going to go as planned. And as you also add, given the fact that there is an ongoing counteroffensive by Ukraine, or at least the beginnings of it, some people may well feel that this is simply not the right time, either for danger or for a lack of clarity of what's going on the ground, to try to do something like this. If it had been me, and if I were whispering into the ear of people in charge, I would have said, see if you can't set out something of an agenda ahead of time so that at least the participating parties know which direction you're going and where you're facing and how you hope to get there. Maybe not a solution, but certainly an indication of the direction that movement and motion is supposed to portend.
All right, we'll leave it there, Brooks. Thank you so much for speaking to me, and enjoy the rest of your Youth Day, you young person. Thank you so much for joining us right here on eNCA. Brooks Spector, of course, joining us right here on Newsday. We're talking all things, of course, that trip that Cyril Ramaphosa, the Republic of South Africa's president, leading African heads of state on a peacekeeping mission out to Ukraine and Russia. And seems like the security detail and media encountering some delays with Polish officials at Warsaw Airport. We'll keep you updated on that story.